He didn't break in a night. He left quietly, piece by piece, until one morning there was nothing left to carry. He centers himself and stands like a pillar when everyone else is swaying. Calm for him is a discipline, a daily practice, not a lucky trait. He learned to keep his center by choosing clarity over reaction. Small storms no longer rattle him because he trained his breath to be steady. He listens longer than most because he thinks in decades, not minutes. Stillness is his power. It is the place he returns to when noise overwhelms. He does not confuse silence with surrender. He knows silence is armor and strategy. People assume quiet means empty, but it actually means full of thought, values, and limits. He does not perform calm for attention. He protects it like a private garden. Every steady step came from nights of losing sleep and mornings of showing up anyway. He built boundaries quietly, like stacking bricks until the wall was unbreakable. His patience is not infinite, it is refined. It costs energy and it costs truth. He forgives to move forward, not to enable the same pattern again. Compassion is his choice, not his weakness. When he stays measured, he is working, repairing, listening, holding space for growth. He refuses to be baited into chaos because he values the long game. A calm man values the architecture of his life more than the drama of a moment. He never confuses intensity for depth. He knows fireworks burn out. Consistency is his testament. It shows up even when the applause fades. He hates spectacle that pretends to be honesty. He protects his peace by saying no to repetitive harm. His commitment to peace is a daily invoice he pays with presence and restraint. He does not seek validation from volatile applause. He learns the language of pauses. A well-placed pause can reroute anger into sense. He measures responses, not reactions. He refuses to be the emotional janitor for someone's recurring mess. He keeps a list of things he will not accept, and he honors that list silently. He knows that staying for the wrong reasons corrodes identity and breeds quiet rage. He watches patterns with a cautious heart and takes notes without drama. He understands that true strength often looks unintentional to the crowd. He cultivates inner weather so outside storms pass without uprooting him. When others mistake his calm for a blank, he turns it into clarity for himself. He is deliberate with love. Steady does not mean unengaged. He preserves himself not out of selfishness but out of survival. He will not crumble at small fires because he has learned how to tend his own flame. He protects the peace he paid for with the cost of patience and self-honesty. He chooses solitude when necessary, because rebuilding requires space, silence, and unshared reflection to restore strength. Every time. He knew the moment she started playing with the edges of the connection. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was subtle, the kind of shift only a man who pays attention can feel. Responses got slower, but her online activity didn't. Her tone softened in the wrong places and sharpened in the right ones. She didn't ask how his day was. She asked questions that kept distance. She laughed, but not from her chest. Her presence felt like a shadow instead of a person. He didn't panic. He didn't chase. He just observed. Because observation reveals everything people try to hide. She started using silence like a weapon, not a choice. It was intentional, calculated, designed to pull a reaction out of him. But he wouldn't give her the show. He wouldn't amplify the silence she thought would control him. He stopped filling the gaps. He stopped explaining himself when her energy evaporated. He stopped treating her coldness like a puzzle he needed to solve. A man who values his peace doesn't beg for access. When a woman begins testing emotional limits, she wants clarity. She wants to see if you fold. She wants to see if you break. But he didn't bend. He didn't break. He became sharper, calmer, harder to shake. She tried provoking him with minimal effort, hoping he'd overcompensate. He didn't. He matched her silence, but with a different intention. Her silence was manipulation. His silence was self-respect. She expected jealousy. She expected frustration. She expected him to chase the version of her she no longer showed. But he didn't chase ghosts. He didn't chase potential. He responded only to reality. Every cold reply she sent became a reminder of the gap between who she pretended to be and who she really was. He treated those gaps like warnings, not invitations. He started noticing the conversations she avoided, the accountability she dodged, the comfort she felt in keeping him guessing. He watched it all quietly, and every moment pulled him one step further from her orbit. She was testing for emotional chaos. He answered with emotional control. And nothing disarms manipulation faster than a man who refuses to participate. She wanted him reactive. He stayed responsive. She wanted him insecure. He stayed grounded. She wanted him confused. He saw everything clearly. Because when someone shifts their energy, they tell you everything you need to know. He didn't fight for validation from someone who was already halfway out the door. He didn't negotiate with disrespect. He didn't plead with disappearing effort. He simply made one silent decision. If she could change her behavior, he could change his access. He felt the exact moment the dynamic flipped. Not because she admitted anything, but because her arrogance cracked. When a woman realizes her control isn't working, her entire strategy starts trembling. She tried distance. He didn't chase. She tried coldness. He didn't melt. She tried silence. He didn't panic. And that's when something shifted in her. A woman who thought she could predict him suddenly felt blind. Her confidence in her own tactics wasn't as firm as she pretended. She thought she had time to pull him back whenever she wanted. She thought his loyalty was guaranteed. She thought his patience was endless. Until she felt it. That subtle, terrifying sense that he was slipping out of her hands. Not loudly. Not spitefully. Just calmly removing his emotional investment like someone unplugging a cord. Quiet. Clean. Final. She noticed he no longer reacted to her mood swings. Her half-attention didn't excite him. Her delayed replies didn't sting. Her inconsistency didn't make him work harder. Instead of leaning forward, he leaned back. Instead of proving himself, he let her confusion grow. Instead of explaining his worth, he let her feel his absence. Nothing scares a woman more than a man she can no longer sway. She started showing signs of panic without admitting any of it. A sudden attempt to be nicer. A random compliment after weeks of dryness. Questions disguised as curiosity but rooted in fear. A tone that softened because she sensed his withdrawal. She didn't want him. But she didn't want to lose the version of herself she had when he wanted her. When a man stops being emotionally available, a woman feels it in her self-esteem before she feels it in her heart. She replays the moments he used to care. She revisits the attention she once controlled. She misses the validation she thought she deserved. He became a mirror she could no longer manipulate. And that forced her to see the parts of herself she had been running from. The irony was sharp. She only recognized his value when he stopped offering it. Her ego couldn't tolerate the idea of losing a man who wasn't supposed to leave. A man who stayed when others walked. A man who loved without conditions. A man who gave her space, not pressure. Now she felt the weight of losing something stable. Something solid. Something irreplaceable. He didn't break her heart, he disrupted her control. And that shook her deeper than heartbreak ever could. Because when a man she underestimated stops caring, she realizes she wasn't the one in power. She was the one being given access. She felt the shift before she understood it. A pressure she couldn't explain. A silence that didn't feel passive. It felt intentional. His absence wasn't empty. It carried weight. It carried consequence. It carried truth she'd been avoiding. She noticed he no longer asked twice. He no longer justified his feelings. He no longer softened himself to make her comfortable. The man who used to overgive now measured every ounce of energy. It unsettled her. Because his calm wasn't peaceful, it was final. She replayed their last conversations with a new kind of panic. Every moment she dismissed now echoed differently. Every dry reply she sent now felt reckless. Every time she acted unbothered now looked foolish. He wasn't punishing her. He wasn't playing games. He was simply done negotiating for what should have been natural. And the scary part? He did it without raising his voice. Without warnings. Without threats. Just a man choosing his own sanity over chaos. She tried subtle attempts to pull him back. A nicer tone. A sudden check-in. A casual question to test his temperature. But he responded like someone who had already healed from her. Short. Neutral. Calm. Complete. No bitterness. No resentment. Just acceptance. And acceptance is the one thing you can't fight. It made her feel small in a way she didn't expect. Because she realized his love wasn't the fragile thing she once believed. It was powerful because he could turn it off when the respect was gone. She underestimated that part of him. She thought he needed her attention. She thought he relied on her energy. She thought she was the sun he revolved around. But men evolve quietly. And when they do, they evolve past the woman who thought he would stay no matter how she treated him. She began feeling the emptiness she created. Not because he punished her, but because he no longer filled the spaces she neglected. Her ego started screaming before her heart whispered anything. Why isn't he trying? Why isn't he hurt? Why isn't he begging? Why isn't he affected? She expected chaos from him. He answered with composure. She expected anger. He answered with indifference. She expected a fight. He answered with distance. That's when she understood the truth she never wanted to face. She wasn't losing the man. She was losing the version of herself that felt wanted, admired, chosen. And nothing wounds deeper than losing the version of you someone once cherished. His silence wasn't revenge. It was closure. It was growth. It was the final boundary a good man sets when he realizes he's been asking for the bare minimum from someone who couldn't even offer that. And once a man reaches that point, he doesn't come back. She felt his distance like a door slowly closing, and for the first time, the silence felt heavier than any argument they ever had. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was the kind of shift you only notice when you've taken someone's heart for granted for too long. She used to think he'd always be there, ready to explain, ready to fix, ready to try again. But the man standing in front of her now wasn't the same man she once controlled. He wasn't reactive. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't waiting for her approval. He was centered. He was certain. He was done. She tried leaning into old habits. The soft tone, the sudden sweetness, the hints of affection she used like tools. But none of it worked anymore. He didn't lean in. He didn't melt. He didn't mistake her warmth for sincerity. He watched her carefully, not emotionally. He listened, but he wasn't captivated. He responded, but he didn't invest. It confused her. It scared her. It humbled her. Because nothing is more unsettling to a woman than a man she can no longer influence. She started remembering the small moments he used to give her. The attention she dismissed. The effort she minimized. The consistency she overlooked. She missed the version of him who made her feel safe. She missed the comfort she didn't appreciate. She missed the love she assumed would refill itself every time she emptied it. She didn't want to admit it, but losing his affection felt like losing a part of her identity. Not because she loved him deeply, but because he once made her feel valuable without her having to earn it. Now she had to face a new reality. He no longer carried her emotions like they were his responsibility. He no longer treated her inconsistency like a puzzle he needed to solve. He no longer broke himself to understand her instability. He chose himself. And that choice cut deeper than anything she expected. She tried pulling him back with emotion. He answered with logic. She tried using guilt. He answered with boundaries. She tried reminding him of their past. He answered with who he became without her. And that contrast shook her. She realized he wasn't angry, he was free. He wasn't detached, he was healed. He wasn't playing hard to get, he genuinely didn't need what she used to offer. A man who reaches emotional clarity is impossible to manipulate. She saw the truth in his eyes. He no longer lived in the version of the relationship she kept replaying. He had outgrown the dynamic, the drama, the imbalance. He wasn't proving a point. He was moving on. And in that moment she finally understood the one reality she'd been avoiding. She didn't lose him when he walked away. She lost him when he learned he could live without her. She didn't expect the ending to feel this quiet. She imagined explosions, confrontations, last chances, one final emotional storm she could hold on to. Instead, she was left standing in a silence that didn't invite her back in. He didn't announce his exit. He didn't list her mistakes. He didn't deliver a dramatic speech. He just stopped carrying what wasn't his to carry. That was the moment everything collapsed for her. Not when he walked away, but when she realized she no longer had access to him emotionally. A man's distance hurts differently when it's not a tactic. When it's closure. When it's acceptance. When it's the final chapter of a story she kept rewriting in her head. She felt the change in the way he looked at her. Not with anger. Not with sadness. But with the calm indifference of someone who finally understands his worth. He wasn't punishing her. He wasn't teaching her a lesson. He wasn't trying to make her regret anything. He simply healed. And healing made her irrelevant in ways she never imagined. She tried reaching for the emotional buttons that once worked. But nothing lit up anymore. The man who used to react to her slightest shifts now moved like she was a stranger. Not cold. Just unreachable. She tried bringing up memories. He didn't flinch. She tried bringing back old emotions. He didn't budge. She tried reminding him of what they had. He didn't feel the pull. Because the past lost all meaning once he stopped needing validation from it. He didn't hate her. That would have required energy. He didn't resent her. That would have required attachment. He didn't miss her. That would have required longing. He simply outgrew everything she represented. Her biggest fear wasn't losing the relationship. It was losing the version of herself she could only feel through his affection. She missed who she was when he loved her. She missed the warmth she didn't protect. She missed the attention she assumed she'd always have. Now she was left with a hollow truth. He became the man she always wanted. But no longer for her. He became stronger without needing her support. He became wiser without her influence. He became grounded without her presence. And that realization cut deeper than heartbreak. It dismantled her confidence. It stripped her of the illusion of control. It forced her to confront the wreckage she created through inconsistency. She didn't lose him to another woman. She lost him to the man he was becoming. A man who stopped tolerating emotional shortcuts. A man who stopped sacrificing his peace. A man who learned that love without respect is self-destruction. Her final shock wasn't his silence. It was the realization that his silence wasn't about her anymore. It was about him. His growth. His clarity. His peace. He didn't walk away to hurt her. He walked away to save himself. And for the first time she understood why. She never imagined he would become a man she could no longer reach. Not emotionally. Not mentally. Not even through the memories she once weaponized. Everything about him felt different now. The way he carried himself. The way he spoke. The way he no longer flinched at her presence. He walked with a steadiness she didn't recognize. A calm that didn't include her. She watched him the way people watch someone they've misjudged for too long. With realization. With regret. With the kind of shock that hits too late to be useful. He was no longer fighting battles she created. He wasn't drowning in the emotions she refused to understand. He wasn't begging for clarity she never intended to give. He moved like a man who had been reborn by the very pain she delivered. She tried reading his eyes, hoping to find the love that once lived there. But all she saw was distance. Healthy distance. Protected distance. Distance built from self-respect, not resentment. Every time she tried to open a door, she found it locked. Not in anger. In acceptance. He wasn't shutting her out. He had simply outgrown the part of himself that kept letting her in. She tried testing him with softness, the kind she used only when she felt him slipping. But he didn't fold. He didn't warm up. He didn't step backward into old patterns. He had learned too much. He had lost too much. He had rebuilt too much. By the time she came back with sincerity, he had already moved into a new version of himself. A version that didn't need her apologies to feel whole. She sensed that shift like a warning. He wasn't the man who once waited for her emotional clarity. He wasn't the man who once adored her without limits. He wasn't the man who once excused her distance as confusion. He became the man she hoped he'd become, just not for her. That truth tasted bitter. It felt unfair, even though she crafted the outcome with her own actions. She realized he was no longer tied to who she used to be for him. He didn't see her as the girl he once cherished. He saw her as the lesson that shaped his strength. She wasn't the love story. She was the turning point. A chapter he outgrew. A memory he no longer revisited. A version of him that no longer existed. She tried reaching for the past, hoping it still had power. But the past no longer had leverage over a man who finally understood his worth. He didn't heal to return. He healed to evolve. She stood in front of a man who had leveled up while she stayed the same. And nothing stings deeper than watching someone become everything you wanted, after you're no longer part of their world. That was her final realization. She didn't lose him because he changed. She lost him because he finally saw what he deserved. She never expected the ending to echo louder than the relationship itself. But endings have a way of revealing truths people try to bury, and this one hit her harder than any argument, fight, or silent night they ever shared. For the first time, she wasn't in control of the narrative. He wasn't waiting. He wasn't hoping. He wasn't holding space for her to finally show up. He had already rewritten his story without her. She kept searching for little cracks in his armor, moments where he might soften, moments where he might slip, moments where he might still care. But he didn't. His energy didn't bend for her anymore. His patience didn't stretch to accommodate her anymore. His heart didn't move when she tried leaning into old patterns. The truth was simple. She waited too long to value what she assumed would never disappear. Now she watched a man who once loved her fiercely walk with a freedom she never thought he could reach. It wasn't arrogance. It wasn't revenge. It was release. He had disconnected from her in a way she never believed possible. Quietly, fully, permanently. She tried using honesty for the first time. But honesty means nothing when it arrives after the damage. She tried giving effort now. But effort loses value when it comes years too late. She finally spoke from the heart. But hearts don't synchronize when one of them has already healed. He saw her sincerity. He understood it. But understanding didn't equal returning. Not this time. She learned a painful truth. Men don't leave when they're angry. They leave when they're tired. And he was exhausted from carrying a connection she treated like an accessory. She tried showing him the version of herself she hid for so long. But he wasn't interested in potential anymore. He wasn't interested in what she could be, someday. He wanted consistency, not promises. He wanted respect, not excuses. He wanted love without conditions or emotional traps. And she couldn't offer that. Not then. Not now. He didn't walk away because someone else replaced her. He walked away because he finally replaced the part of himself that tolerated being an option. That was the moment she broke. Not because he punished her, but because he healed past her reach. She thought time would keep him tethered. She thought memories would recreate gravity. She thought her presence alone would pull him back. But healing changes the orbit of a man's life. And once his gravity shifts, everything that used to hold him loses its pull. She faced the mirror and saw the reality she avoided for months. She wasn't fighting for him. She was fighting for the version of herself she only liked when he loved her. He gave her chances she didn't notice. He gave her love she didn't protect. He gave her commitment she didn't match. Now he was giving her something she never expected. A quiet goodbye that wasn't spoken, but lived. And nothing is harder to swallow than losing a man not because he stopped loving you, but because he finally started loving himself. She didn't recognize the man standing in front of her anymore, not because he became colder but because he became complete. The version of him she once pushed aside had transformed into someone she could no longer influence, no matter how tightly she held onto the past. He wasn't searching her face for answers. He wasn't waiting for explanations. He wasn't holding on to what-ifs or unfinished sentences. He had become immune to the pull she once had over him. Not bitter, just evolved. Not guarded, just aware. Not distant, just done giving parts of himself to someone who never protected them. She tried stepping back into his life the way people try stepping into a room they used to own. Confident. Hopeful. A little entitled. But nothing opened for her this time. His energy no longer bent toward her. His attention no longer softened around her. His presence no longer revolved around her emotions. She could feel the consequences of her inconsistency in every second he didn't give her back the comfort she once abused. He didn't smile the same way. He didn't hold space the same way. He didn't offer warmth without intention anymore. She felt like she was meeting him for the first time, except this version wasn't impressed, wasn't hopeful, wasn't trying. He didn't need her validation to feel grounded. He didn't need her affection to feel alive. He didn't need her presence to feel whole. This scared her more than heartbreak ever could. Because heartbreak is emotional. But being replaced by his growth? That's spiritual. She watched him speak with clarity she never thought he'd reach. Every word held weight. Every pause held power. Every boundary felt like a door she could never enter again. She wasn't looking at the man she hurt. She was looking at the man he became because of the hurt. He didn't shrink around her anymore. He didn't soften his values for temporary peace. He didn't silence his truth to maintain the illusion of connection. He rose. He expanded. He leveled up. And now she was the one left trying to catch up to a man who had grown far beyond her emotional reach. She felt the sting of regret in the spaces he no longer filled for her. She felt the echo of his absence in every part of her life that once relied on his presence. She felt the weight of losing a man who finally realized his worth did not depend on her recognition of it. He didn't evolve to prove anything. He evolved because staying the same kept him tied to a version of himself that accepted far less love, clarity, and respect than he deserved. She didn't lose him to another woman. She lost him to the man he was always meant to become. And once a man becomes who he was meant to be, he never returns to who he had to be to love you. Subscribe for more powerful storytelling and voiceover-driven masculine psychology content.